Hello, my name is Caleb Smith with the Rock and Miner newspaper, here for your news update for June 14th, 2020. As a news editor, I'm often pushing deadline to get more local content and that's why it's a little bit later this hour. We're going to start with a follow-up on yesterday's train fire. Officials say that it was extinguished around 3:30 Sunday morning by local fire crews and Union Pacific Resources. A lot of people turned out to help with the fire, be there for support. Sweetwater County Fire District number 1 took the lead at the fire, but was sure to praise the efforts of many local groups, including the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Office, Wyoming Highway Patrol, Sweetwater Medics, Wyoming Department of Transportation, Sweetwater County Road and Bridge, Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport, the Airport Fire Department, in addition to Airport Manager Devin Brubaker, the Sweetwater County Fire Department, Rock Springs Fire Department, Wyoming Department of Homeland Security Region Number 4 Response Team, Bureau of Land Management, and even residents who dropped off food and water to the emergency responders. We don't really know the cause of the derailment, which involved around 30 cars, including 10 that caught on fire. We've been told that a Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration / Accident Incident Investigations has been on the ground investigating the cause. When it comes to injuries, we also learned that 2 deputies received second-degree burns from a large explosion that happened early in the incident. Maybe you've seen that certain videos online where it's burning, and then suddenly it flares up. As previously reported, the train was having is labeled as mixed freight, which included ethanol and alcohol. For those curious about the especially dark fluids, Sweetwater County Fire District number 1 Chief Scott Kirshner noted that there was some plastic-like material, and that's why you had the dark black smoke that could be seen from such a distance. We're going to quickly run through the coronavirus numbers. In the state of Wyoming, we have 841 lab-confirmed cases, according to Wyoming Department of Health, 219 probable cases in Wyoming. The state death count still remains at 18 people. Other numbers that are currently unchanged are the Sweetwater County figures, which are still at 32 lab-confirmed cases, 8 probable cases. In the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, total cases is up to 2,063,812 cases. And the CDC always stresses that the numbers over the weekend are unofficial. It's hard to get in touch with some people over the weekend. We got to give them a break sometime. Look for numbers to be look for them to have numbers on Monday that don't have an asterisk printed next to them. But the total case number, at least as we understand it on Sunday, is 25,468 new cases compared to Saturday. Total deaths now sits at 115,271 people, which is 646 new deaths compared to yesterday. Globally, we're looking at 7,893,700 new cases, according to Johns Hopkins University. Global deaths sits at 432,922 people. And the global recovery now sits at 3,766,886. Now, the main reason why I'm filming this later than usual, and will be in a hurry to upload it, was that the Rock Springs Interfaith Committee hosted a prayer vigil in Bunning Park this evening. Went from about started a pitch early, just before 6, and went about 8-ish. There's just a group in town that it's more than one denomination, different churches, different religions, but all recognizing the value of faith and holding one another up and looking for times to come together and be stronger by standing together. The participants included Father Bill Hill of the Holy Spirit Catholic Church. He introduced the event. Pastor Levi Powers gave a quick reading of Scripture and also led a prayer talking about the importance of preserving the community from evil, preserving the community from racism, and keeping us in unity. Pretty much all the speakers in one way or another talked about the importance of unity and recognizing individuals' value and how recognizing these innate our innate rights, the things that make us special, and the things that, like I said, give us value. If we do that more often, we wouldn't necessarily need the police, and we wouldn't necessarily be having some of the have these long simmering troubles coming to a boiling point and having to be figuring out what's the best way to move forward from here. Mayor Tim Como also spoke at the event. Thematically, he kept coming back to the golden rule, which is do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And if we go by the expectation that most of us want to be treated well, treat others well, we'll get that in return. They'll be encouraged to do that to others. We have a lot less issues. He joked about if everybody did that, there'd be those like Chief Pacheco in the police department that'd be out of a job, though he was confident that they'd find something that would still drive their passions and still give them an outlet to do good for the community. Pastor Nicole Height of the First Assembly of God Church, who was actually my personal pastor, also spoke. She talked about how we should have empathy. And even though we may not have one another, we may not have the exact same set of experiences or ups and downs, that we can have compassion even when we're not in the exact same situation, because everyone knows what it's like to feel hurt. Everyone knows what it's like to have been broken. And we can draw upon that to better listen, to better communicate, to better, like I said, connect with people across our different backgrounds and different perspectives, to still find things that make us all human, the things that we have shared. Chief Dwayne Pacheco of the Rock Springs Police Department talked about some of the goals from the police department and the steps they take to make sure that tragedy, undue violence, brutality doesn't occur in our community. He talked about how that the police department works really hard for people to wake up and see no crime has happened. Honestly, if they're doing the job great, that's technically the people don't even notice. They wake up in the morning and the car's still there and nothing defaced and everything's fine. Things that we often take for granted until it's gone, until your family's been the one that's having to deal with something stolen, something taken away from them. He talked about how they are actively going out in the community and working on good reputation, good relations, and knowing these things don't happen overnight. These are things that they have to, on a regular basis, maintain, and you just can't coast on this stuff. It has to be actively earned on a regular basis. And the steps of the Rock Springs Police Department and other law enforcement agencies that I've interacted with in Southwest Wyoming, especially in Sweetwater County, are taking these steps because they recognize its value. And They know that's what makes a community a better place to be, a safer place to be. Bernadine Kraft of the Holy Communion Episcopal Church was also set to speak, but allergies flared up, and it was quite a windy day. If you are allergic to something blowing in the wind, you got a nose full of it today. But Melinda Bass spoke in her place. She's also the director of the local YWCA. Conveying parts of Reverend Kraft's message, she talked about how conveyed a prayer that we as a community come together to be a force of healing, a force of love, a force of grace. These are the things that one person can't fix the world, two people can't fix the world. But the more you add, it grows exponentially, and that's how you can reach tipping point. That's how you can reach positive change. One thing Melinda added for herself, and she says that especially as the YWCA, which its stated mission is to eliminate racism and empower women, which is aim high, go big. Something we're still working on in a lot of different areas. But she said one thing that they're looking for, and we've seen similar things before, she says that people should be pushing that this is not just a moment, but a movement. As in, a lot of moments people briefly get riled up, make a lot of promises, say they're going to fix things, but it just stays in that moment, and other things go on. And in a movement, it continues, and you're making progress, and you're trying new things. And maybe the new things aren't working, so you try something else. But it's not just something that is slapped on placards and posters and then forgotten, eventually recycled. Hopefully they'll just throw that stuff in the trash. Recycling center. It's got a place for that stuff. And like I said, not just dropped after a short amount of time. There's a lot of people in this nation, in this world, that they're still waiting on promises to be kept that have been made to their great grandparents, their progenitors. Pastor Nate Purvis of the, forgive me for not having written this all down more clearly, of the New Hope Baptist Church, closed the event. He stressed that there's a lot of people who are under the misconception that just because they haven't experienced it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that something doesn't exist. Primarily racism, favoritism. He talked about how he grew up and he's in a mixed race family, and that's led to some interesting places because depending on where he's lived, sometimes he received pushback from being the lightest skinned person in the area, and then in other areas he was the darkest. He and his family, his cousins, they were the darkest skinned ones, and how that's impacted him. One of the things that made me stop and think was that he was telling the story about how one day his son was at the rec center and he was called the N-word. And I mean, there's no age you want to have that conversation with your family, to talk about the words and what they mean and how are you supposed to respond to that. He said that one of the things in that moment he was thinking how do I teach my son not to be the person that people expect him to be, not to live down to this hateful, horrible stereotype, this racist branding that's meant to hurt and provoke and to keep them down. Nate said talking about his son and himself, his family, saying, his skin and my skin are not our sin. It's interesting where people put values and weights and whatnot. He noted, and I'm sure if you spent any time watching the news or on social media, you know that there are some people more upset about a dog being tortured than the death of George Floyd. He admitted George Floyd wasn't a perfect man, but no one deserves to die that way, with somebody's knee on your neck for so long. And while things look harsh, he talked about how it's still his goal that hopefully the young generation, the generation that is just starting to pay attention now, or maybe are they even at the edge where they don't quite understand what's going on. They don't get the face mask with the coronavirus and the distancing. They don't understand all the images they're seeing on TV or the people that they're seeing protesting. And it was noted that protests are in every state. It's spreading across the world. Going back to Chief Pacheco saying, no matter what some people say, America remains a trendsetter. The debates that started here are right now being echoed across the earth. And we should be doing what we can so kids who are growing up today and kids who aren't quite there yet reach the dream of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who desperately wanted people to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And at the end, Pastor Nate did what I've seen in some other places, including a previous vigil that was in Burning Park at the start of last week, was have a moment of silence that lasted 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The same amount of time that, from what we've seen from multiple cameras, that was the amount of time that an officer kept his knee on George Floyd's back and neck, and even as he's playing, he was pleading he couldn't breathe, and breathe until the point when he stopped breathing and he died. And I've sat and I've watched videos and felt the seconds pass, and like I said, the protest demonstration and public discussion that was back on Monday also had that moment of silence. And there was one interesting in this case that was a little bit different for me this time. I was fiddling with the camera. We'll be looking online. We'll put as much of the event on social media as we can. Fortunately, I ran out of space on my memory card and was about out of juice. I actually quickly switched the memory card, and then the camera died for lack of battery power. But because it's where I was, I at that time I didn't shift my position. I stayed where I was, and I was on my knees all that time. And as long as standing or even just sitting and feeling time pass and recognizing that there were so many moments interrupted, I'm kneeling there and recognizing that the officer must have felt any movement that George Floyd had. And honestly, some of its age and fitness, and maybe this officer is better equipped than mine, or genetically has better knees. But it doesn't even feel good to kneel on your knees for that long. It's uncomfortable to stay in that position, to recognize that whatever motivation was behind him, and I'll leave that speculation to other people. I won't speak for this officer. But it comes to me, it was I was fighting against myself, no other factor, to stay in that position, because it's uncomfortable and it's not natural, and you feel every movement in your own body and anything around you. I was Healing it in some mulch next to a tree, and recognizing that it's not only was it so long, but if his situation was similar to mine, that's something that it took extra effort to hold that position. No one deserves to die that way. More than one speaker noted that this isn't the first case that we've had. They said it's probably not going to be the last case, and even in all the protests, it's been so disappointing to watch more people die in police or at the hands of police and law enforcement. To see officers who are out there to serve and protect dying themselves. There's so much frustration. There's so much search for answers. One of the things that struck me, and it wasn't just because it's my pastor, but Pastor Nicole talked about how we don't have the answers, but it's encouraging that people feel free to come together and talk about this stuff. And that's how you get started. If you're not even talking to each other, how are you going to work with each other to make changes? And of course, it needs to be more than words. It can start with words, and those should lead to actions too. That was something else that was also noted. When it comes to many of the people who were speaking today and listening, and I wish we could say that we knew what to happen next. It's interesting because it's going to be a combination of individuals taking responsibility, starting conversations, speaking up when they see something wrong, not letting things slide, not just for their own conduct, for those around them. There were all these people around George Floyd. And if one of them would have done something more, perhaps we wouldn't be at this tipping point. But since this is the moment we find ourselves in, I'm hopeful that maybe you can be like me and other people who are some of the speakers and those who are listening, and those who were there in spirit or in same mind, even if they weren't there in person, who are looking, searching, praying for ways to make this into a positive movement where we can atone for things that have gone wrong and take steps to make the world less dark, make it brighter. Big goals. Not going to be done overnight. But something we should be trying to do nonetheless. This has been your news update from the Rocket Miner. I'm Caleb Smith, wishing you a good day and a safe tomorrow.